Hello and welcome to this second video in the Skills for Practice series, where I'm going to talk about how skills fit within the overall social work process. I want to start by inviting you to think a little bit about what we mean by skills. So we may think of a sports person, an athlete or a footballer or a gymnast having skills. We may think of a doctor or a surgeon or something like that having skills. We may think of an artist or a musician having skills. But what do we actually mean by a skill? So I'm going to start here by giving you my personal definition of a skill. So this is my definition of a skill. You won't find this in any of the books. This is something that's come from me. So if you want to reference this, you will need to reference it to me. So a skill is a habitual set of practices that allow you to achieve a consistent result. So let me unpick that definition a little bit with you, because it's not quite as straightforward as it sounds. So when we talk about habitual, it starts with habitual. Often we think about habits as things that we do often, that we do regularly, but that's not really what I'm driving at here. What I'm on about here is how natural and how unconsciously you perform that action. So a habit, as I'm using it here, is more about fluency, not frequency. So when I talk about habitual, I'm talking about the things that you do fluidly, smoothly, naturally, unconsciously. Even if you only did them once or twice a year, when you come back to do them, they come back to you naturally. And that's really what I'm talking about here. I'm also talking about a set of practices. So skills are often not individual isolated bits of behaviour. They're a coordinated pattern of behaviours. And those behaviours themselves are quite varied. So, if we look at it, they can be ways of thinking, acting, or relating to people. So with the way we habitually think about a situation, the way we habitually act in a situation, or the way we habitually relate to other people. So let's move on to the third thing here, which is when it's talking about being a consistent result. So let's take the first of those words, which is the word consistent. And again, what I'm talking about here is, even a skilled person will not necessarily do things perfectly. They will do things consistently. And this really means that you're doing it not perfectly, but just better. A skilled person will always achieve better results, or will achieve better results more often than a less skilled person. And finally, when we're talking about results, the key thing here is it's not random. Skills are goal directed. So we're talking about a goal. We're looking at what you are trying to achieve. So as you're using a skill, you know what you're trying to achieve even before you set out to achieve it. So let's move that on then and talk about how this fits within the social work process. So just to remind you that the social work process involves these 6 stages. So it involves a stage of engagement. Now remember when I talked in that last definition, I was talking about results and goals. The goal of the engagement stage is to form a working relationship. That's what you're trying to do when you engage. Having engaged, you then assess. Now, assessment is a complicated word. It means lots of different things to different people. But in a social work context, assessment really needs deciding what needs to change. That then leads us to planning. So the assessment is the what needs to change. The planning is, well, how are you going to change it? And that needs to be agreed with all the people that are involved in the social work process in the particular circumstances. That then leads to implementation. And particularly for most social work practice, implementation is about actually encouraging people to do things for themselves, not doing things to people or for people. Then you're going to run into the issue of review. And that's really checking to see the goal here. This what I've got here is the goals here. The goals of the review is to check if it's working. Your goal is to know whether or not your implementation is working. That then leads you on to closure. And closure is about ending the relationship healthily. It's very easy in social work to go into people's lives, turn their lives upside down, create massive challenges for people, and then walk away. That's not good practice. So let's look at how that might appear visually across the period of your work with a particular service user. So you're going to start the process here with engagement. So you're going to form that working relationship. Having formed that working relationship, you are then going to move on to assessment to find out what needs to change. Having assessed, you are then going to plan how you are going to change it. Having planned, you are then going to implement your plan. You are then going to be reviewing your plan. What you'll notice here is these stages are not separate stages. As you assess, you are continuing to assess your engagement. As you plan, you're planning your assessment and you're planning to maintain your engagement. As you implement, you're implementing your plan, you're implementing what you've assessed, and you're implementing what you learned from your engagement, and you are reviewing that all the way through the process. And then finally, this leads us to closure. Leads us to the point where we finish the process off. I also want to talk briefly about the skill sets you need to do that. So I've talked about those 6 phases of the social work process. Well, what are the skill sets that you're going to need to do that? Well, the first skill set you're going to need is your relationship building skills. Relationships are at the heart of social work process. If you cannot form good, collaborative, respectful working relationships with service users, you will not be a good social worker. If you can form those relationships, you will be a good social worker. The second set are your communication skills. These are, again, very much at the heart of social work. To some extent, your ability to communicate is as important as, say, a surgeon's ability to handle surgical instruments. Words, language, body language are the tools of our trade, and we need to use them well in order to be good social workers. Then there's the recognition that social work is very much a job about helping people face the challenges of daily living, and that requires us to be involved in problem solving. So we need good problem solving skills. We do all of that in a complicated, complex, chaotic situation which is characterized by uncertainty. And therefore, we need to have good reflective practice skills. We need to be able to constantly think about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and is it working. And finally, we deal with high degrees of uncertainty, emotional distress. Social workers, you're often hearing very difficult things, very painful things to listen to. So you need personal resilience skills. You need to be strong. And all of that rests and is united by our values and beliefs. They underpin the whole process. So that then talks about how we do the process and what's involved in it. But particularly here, what I'm going to talk to you about in the next video is actually how you go about developing those skill sets. So thank you for listening. Hope that's been useful, and I look forward to discussing this material with you further in the classroom.